Howzit here, welcome back to another camera comparison video. And today I've got the newly released global edition of the Redmi Note 11S, and I'm testing it against the Xiaomi 11T because they both share the same main rear camera sensor, which is the Samsung HM2 108 megapixel camera. And so I figure you might be looking at these two phones thinking they have the exact same camera setup, except that the 11T's got that extra 5 megapixel macro camera, but pretty much the same camera setup. But the Note 11S will save you at least a couple $100 depending on where you're purchasing this from and what part of the world you live in. And so that's why I'm doing this comparison. I'm going to show you a bunch of photos and videos in both good and low light conditions, so you can decide for yourself if saving that money is worth it here, if camera performance is really important to you. And so the 11T right now has a frontal audio feature turned on, so it's probably canceling out more background noise, so pay attention to the audio and see if that's helping here in this outdoor environment. But let's go ahead and try to check out the stability and walk around with the two phones here. Everyone, so I figured we just walk and talk while testing out the stability of these front-facing cameras, which are pretty much, I think, the same sensors. They're both 16 megapixel cameras, capable of shooting up to 1080p 30 frames per second video. The 11T does have a frontal sound feature, which is turned on right now, so the audio out of the 11T might be sounding a little bit better. It might be canceling out more noise because it's directionally focused towards me, versus the 11S, which does not have that frontal audio feature. And because they both have MediaTek processors, albeit different chipsets, I thought this would be an interesting comparison. Let's take a look at all the photos and videos from both these phones and let me know what you think. So here's a rear video test of the Redmi Note 11S on the right and the Xiaomi 11T on the left, and they're both recording from the rear facing cameras right now at 4K 30 frames per second on the 11T and 1080p 30 frames per second on the Note 11S. That's their max resolutions and frame rates. And so I'm just going to pan around here so you can see how each of these ultra wide angle cameras compare. So this is the ultra wide angle lens on each, so take note of any of the color reproduction differences or exposure differences, etc. And let's go ahead and move into the main lens. Alright, so we're back with the main cameras on each. You cannot actively record and switch cameras, so I had to stop the recording and restart with the main lenses on each. And again, I'm just panning around so you can see side by side how each of the main cameras compare here in this particular setting. And if we pan over here to the right, we'll test zoom out on that cell tower. So let's go to maybe a 2x digital zoom on the Note 11S and same 2x digital here on the 11T. And so they both can max out at 6x digital, I think, at 4K here. So, yep, 6x digital zoom there on the 11S, and similarly on the 11T, you can see the bird hitting that cell tower there. So that's how the digital zooms compare. And the viewfinder kind of about the same, maybe actually a little bit better on the 11S, but not by a lot. So let's back both of these out to 1x here on the 11T, and same thing here on the Note 11S. And then let's go ahead and test autofocus on the post. So there you go, snaps in pretty quickly. And of course we're testing out that background noise with the sirens in the background there, as you can hear. But autofocus here on the Note 11S looks pretty good. And on the Xiaomi 11T, maybe a little bit slow to pop in there, but let's try again. Refocus pretty well. So fairly fast on the 11T as well. And let's go ahead and test some stabilization as we walk down the stairs here. And then eventually through the pathway, so you can see what this looks like here side by side. Again, 1080p on the 11S and 4K on the 11T. Let's go ahead and jog a little bit just to stress out the stabilization. And we'll pull up here and pan up into the afternoon sun so you can see how both these cameras adjust their exposure. Everyone, so here's a low light video test from the Redmi Note 11S and Xiaomi 11T. This is the ultra wide angle lens to start out on each at 1080p 30 frames per second. So the Xiaomi 11T ultra wide angle lens maxes out at 1080p 30, while the main camera can shoot up to 4K, and of course the Note 11S tops out at 1080p on both lenses here. So just panning around to give you a feel for how these ultra wide angle lenses compare here in this particular setting side by side. So let's go ahead and switch over to the main lenses now. Okay, and here are the main cameras on each of the two phones here, and the 11T is now recording in 4K while the 11S is still at 1080p. So this is what they look like here in this particular setting and how they look against that really bright street light there. But let's go ahead and pan around this way to start walking to test the stabilization out here, as well as to move over to a darker area, a bit more of a challenging lighting situation for both of these phones. So also pay attention to the micro jitters as I walk here. That's pretty common to see that in the stabilization in low light. And already it's getting much darker, and as you round the corner it's going to be even darker still. And both these phones are looking kind of dark in the viewfinder. The Note 11S seems to be trying to brighten things up a little bit more. Both of them are, but still a bit dark. If anything, the white balance looks a little bit off in the viewfinder on the 11S. Not sure how that's looking on the final video here, but if we pan up into the night sky, there is some light pollution, so it's not completely pitch black, but it's looking kind of dark on each, actually a little bit darker than it probably really is. Now let's go ahead and pan over here to this side here, down the darker alleyway. We've got some of a mixed lighting situation. You've got some of that lighting coming off of the building there. So you can see how both of these phones are handling this particular medium kind of a lighting situation. So there you go, low light test on both phones here. So here's a low light video test from the front facing cameras of the Redmi Note 11S and Xiaomi 11T. This is at 1080p 30 frames per second, which is the max resolution and frame rate on both these front facing cameras. And the 11T has frontal sound on, so it should be doing a better job of picking up my voice and eliminating more background noise than the 11S that does not have that audio option. And I'm starting my usual testing spot here in some pretty well lit area, so you can see how these front facing cameras do in some pretty optimal light. But we'll just go ahead and start walking to test the stabilization so you can see what that looks like here side by side. And as you probably noticed, the 11S has a much tighter crop, so it can fit less in the frame than the 11T can, but both should be stabilized here as we walk along here to the fountain to my left right now. so we can test out that frontal audio and how that compares here with that background noise. And if we pan this way, you'll see all the really bright street lights behind me. So we can see how these front-facing cameras are handling that really bright light, and actually pretty well on both these phones. And if anything, the Note 11S is a little bit noisier right now than the 11T from what I can see in the viewfinder. And stepping back into this little bit darker area here, I'll let you see what this looks like side by side in this little bit darker setting right now. And both are definitely doing a job of trying to brighten things up. So you can really see the noise right now on the Note 11S, a little bit more pronounced than it is on the 11T right now. So that's going to do it for this camera comparison between the Redmi Note 11S and Xiaomi 11T, both with the 108 megapixel main cameras on the rear, same Samsung sensor. So let me know what you thought about how the little bit less expensive Note 11S stood up against the 11T here. For me personally, I mean, low light was not going to be a contest. It's for low light, the 11T definitely was a clear winner. But other than that, in some good lighting conditions, I think the Note 11S actually did pretty well and kept up fairly nicely with the 11T, and which was kind of expected. Same sensor, but there is probably some differences in image processing with a different chipset. But I think, you know, to correct some of the overexposure issues that you probably noticed on either of these phones, they both have Pro mode, which is nice. So you can actually dial the exposure back if you want in Pro mode. And that's a nice feature on fairly inexpensive phones here. So let me know what your thoughts are. Drop me a comment. I'm always interested to hear what you think. And if I can help answer any questions about these phones, leave them as a comment below as well. I'll try to answer what I can. And as always, thanks for watching.